Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. For those who don't know me, I'm Jill Manoff, editor-in-chief at Glossy, and this is our third Glossy Plus Talks. It's our member-exclusive talk weekly Wednesday. We've been doing it at 1 o'clock. And we took a different approach this first round for April, where we chose topics that would be really relevant to the audience and to the times, and settled on this idea of the future of DTC. The first person that came to my mind for this topic was Matt Scanlan, who, I don't know, the DTC master, the DTC whisperer. He is the CEO and co-founder of Naadam, also CEO of newly launched Takun, CEO of soon to launch Something Navy. So he'll have much to share today. Definitely want to dig into his expertise, give you guys a chance to ask him questions as well. So we'll make an event of it. Let's move ahead. All right, again, for those of you who have yet to join our talks, they are weekly scheduled Zoom calls featuring a conversation with the industry's top executives. So far, we've had Brian Berger from Mack Weldon, who spoke to the future of loyalty. We've also had Natalie Mackey from Winky Lux, who was talking experiential. So as the next bullet point points out, we're showcasing topics across fashion, beauty, and wellness. And so we are having those, again, insiders, the subject matter experts, those who can best speak to the changing times on these hot topics that we've laid out. So next week, I'll get there, but we're kind of bouncing back and forth between fashion folks and beauty folks to really cater to what everyone in our audience is looking for. With these uncertain times, our goal is to keep our audience connected and informed at the highest level in our new reality. Of course, we're used to doing events. We don't want to stop there. We love the chance to bring our community together to give you a chance to learn from, again, leaders in the space, learn from each other, and also, give us a chance to learn from you as we're writing about this every day. And our membership community is important. So yes, keep coming back. We'll see you next week. As you can see here, our next event we have planned is next Wednesday on the 29th, and that will be with Bryce and Gigi, co-founders of Papari Beauty, and that will be hosted by our executive editor, Priya Rao. Okay, just wanted to sneak in this little plug. We've started an Instagram live series on Fridays at 1 p.m. With leaders. We're calling it Leading from Home, or LFH. If you would like to hashtag, you should. And so our next guest is Candace Huffine. She is model, designer. She's got the brand, athletic wear brand, Your Day One. So she's going to speak to how she's leading her brand through these turbulent times. And she's also going to touch on how the modeling industry is changing. Obviously, she's not going on all of the shoots that she once did. So that will be definitely interesting. She's also an investor in some fashion brands like 11 Honore. So we'll ask her about that as well. Before we let Matt kick things off, I'm just going to go through here the state of the industry, 5 things that I'm seeing in terms of the direct-to-consumer space and how they're evolving right now in particular. Number 1, profitability will be prioritized. So speaking to the future of DTC, this is not maybe jarring or a surprise, but we're seeing a move from a focus on revenue, kind of fast track growth, to this more sustainable growth. So we'll talk, Matt will definitely touch on that. Number 2, a strong community will be even more important. So we've always, direct-to-consumer brands know well the importance of community. We've been seeing a lot in our reporting and in our talking to brand founders and insiders that, brands are trying things that the Glossiers and the Fenties and brands with a tight community have done all along now. And, things that, like an Instagram live event, or maybe they're creating a Spotify playlist, and they're telling us, we never had time to do this before. So as they're seeing the value of building a community and creating this lifestyle and having this one-on-one connection with their audience, they're going to see the value in that. We think that that's going to stick. Number 3, efficiency will remain a focus. Talk to Matt a little bit about this beforehand, just kind of eliminating the bloat, I would say, in terms both in-house as you see that, fewer people can maybe tackle the same job, get the job done. So it's doing more with less. And that applies to marketing also. Kind of, you want to see the return on ad spend. Maybe you'll be doing focusing on those ads that can guarantee that rather than doing so much, I would say. Number 4, e-commerce competition will spike. If we've seen one thing this whole time in the last couple of weeks, it's brands telling us we're so glad that our e-commerce site was ready because it became their only sales channel. Also on I would say wholesale partner side, they're learning they can't count on wholesale partners the way they used to. Maybe they're getting ticked off at the way wholesale partners have treated them throughout the situation, kind of just left them high and dry. We're hearing that, the word partner doesn't really apply anymore. They don't feel like they're a partner. So we're seeing a mass move to direct channels across the board. So there'll be more competition there for sure. And last but not least, supply chains will see a shakeup. If we've heard one thing, again, on the supply chain side, it's the importance of diversification. So even those that are vertically integrated, like they had all their eggs in one basket. So they had one source, they weren't able to fulfill orders. So there's going to be a diversification, and that will be, a project, time consuming. So we'll see some changes there. That is all I'm going to say for now. So at this time, I'm going to introduce Matt. Matt, thank you for being here, and I will let you take it away.
Cool. All right. Well, let me share my screen. Let me see if this works. Okay. Is that good? Can you see it?
That's perfect.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think, well, first of all, my experience with all of this is, I don't think unlike anybody else's. I'm seeing things in real time. I think the overriding sentiment is there is no right way to proceed amidst everything that's happening. I look most notably at some of the economic changes, and I look at it largely from a macro perspective. But I'm not an economist, and I'm very careful about any sort of predictions and make it clear that I'm reading tea leaves pretty much like everybody else from a consumer perspective. I think there are some very kind of core qualitative elements to what's happening now that we can use to predict how to proceed over the next, call it 6 to 12 months. Every day there's a new piece of information. And so with all of that in mind, the approach that we've adopted, and I think is smart to adopt moving forward, is one of just pure fluidity and flexibility. There's ways to make yourself flexible, and there's ways to be ready, I suppose, for what is unknown. So that's kind of where we are today. But perhaps it's important to take everyone back a step and first, like, pre-qualify how I view one, direct consumer, brand building, what growth looked like, kind of what some of the tentpole or cornerstone elements are for growth. And then why don't I just give a quick little background on myself. So I started an apparel brand called Naadam. It was six years ago now. And I didn't know anything. And we were pretty much leading with very kind of core brand driven ideas. We didn't understand our product. We didn't understand our customer. We just had a value system, and we knew that value system would inevitably lead to product decisions, distribution decisions, etc. But it took time. I remember early on, people told me, this is going to take a long time. You're not going to be there overnight. Immature as I was and unexperienced as I was, I kind of expected that within a couple months we'd be a big business, and that wasn't the case. It takes time. It takes real and I think consequential development from a product and brand standpoint to kind of reach the scale to have something that's fortified. So in any event, the things that I learned along the way were most importantly, product market fit is really critical. If you don't get to a place where your product meets who your customer is, and it's not right size for them, it's not priced appropriately, um, you don't really have a business. And so we developed that, and there were moments where it started to trigger. I'd say, when we released our $75 sweater, that was a really big moment for us. That's where we felt like, oh, this is what product market fit looks like. Because overnight, sales skyrocketed. And we went from trying to figure it out to trying to figure out how to manage scale. And those are two really different things. So product market fit was my number one learning. Also being very close to your customer, understanding what they want, and then developing your value proposition over time to match their needs. The best businesses, in my opinion, and all of this is in my opinion, um, uh, are businesses that in effect hold a mirror up to their customer and say, hey, we are you. We are developing product. We are speaking in a language that is representative of the things that are core to your identity. Now, either we foster your identity development or we kind of meet you where you are. All of that, in my opinion, is representative of a ownable brand value system. Clear differentiator says, okay, I know that that's Naadam. I know that that's something native. I know that that's Takun. If you can look at them across the spectrum and say, I know what each one of these things is, and I can recognize it from 100 feet away, you've developed some ownable, differentiated brand value. Um, in terms of growth, I, I struggled for so long. Like I thought that there would be these kind of turnkey moments where growth would, like I'd be opening a door and we'd be sprinting through it and scale would be off the charts. Didn't really look like that. You have to do 1,000 things right at the exact same time to start chipping away at real growth. Having said that, sometimes that growth can come faster by a product market fit in a market that's huge, or a product that is very scalable. And so we kind of took all those things in mind as we approached what our scale should look like, and what our growth should feel like. Good product will always drive that. Team is probably the most important thing I learned over time, that building a team that is better than you at everything they do is critical. The most humbling experience pretty much of my life, and it's an ongoing experience, is the realization that pretty much every room, including this Zoom that I'm in now, I'm probably the dumbest person in the room. Everybody else has information, skills, and experience that I couldn't recreate. And so building a strong team that feels like a web or a puzzle is very, very critical. Um, and then the thing that I've kind of always relied on are very um, clear financial, um, a clear financial framework, right? Like a foundation of clear cash flow, making sure that you buy something and you sell it for more, and the amount of money you spend is not more than the difference between what you bought it for and what you sold it for. Like really simple stuff. I say this all the time, but if this was rocket science, I wouldn't be smart enough to figure it out. So I boil it down to its simplest format, which is buy something for X, sell it for Y, make sure you don't spend more than the difference between those two things. That's kind of tent pole of building a business. And kind of in an ancillary way, I want to address, in my experience, what the purpose of retail is and was. Hard to know what it'll look like in the future. Having said that, I always felt that retail represented a very real opportunity for customers to um, to interact with product and your brand. I don't think there's any replica for the real thing. Like you need to touch it, you need to feel it, you need to be there, you need to talk to somebody. That's like core to, I think, human nature. And so for that reason, we felt that retail was a meaningful part of our overall distribution makeup. It's also representative of a larger marketing strategy. All of these things need to, again, work together kind of in a web. I never, like, I think of everything I do in very practical, consumer, like I'm a basic average Joe consumer, but I think about the decisions we make along those lines, which is like, I don't buy something after seeing it once. I need like a couple touch points. And those touch points can be manufactured through conversations, through something I saw on the street, something I saw in a taxi cab, something I saw on the subway, and enough ads on my social media. Doesn't matter, right? Like you need multiple touch points, in retail can be a really substantial one. And so we always, admired brands that were doing it well. I think the best ones position retail well within kind of their portfolio of distribution and marketing strategies. We are still in a lot of ways executing what that would look like, obviously with what's developed through COVID. That's changed and it's mutating, but I still think it'll be an important part of our mix long term. And then kind of the final point I want to put on all of this is the decisions we're going to make as a business, across businesses over the next 6 to 12 months, are going to be driven by the same things that develop the strategies I've laid out here, which is the fundamentals and pragmatic response to the reality of certain situations. If people aren't shopping in store, then they're probably shopping online. If they're not going outside, they're probably not buying shoes, right? Like really simple stuff. And so we are leaning into kind of the basics of consumerism with an eye towards conservancy to make sure that we are being pragmatic and responsible through all of this. So I'm going to move on to the next slide here, however I can do that. 1 second. So I want to address evolving consumer demand. And by the way, Jill, if you want to cut me off and tell me to shut up at any point, you can totally do that. But I want to kind of like walk everybody through the way I'm thinking about things. But you let me know.
You're doing good.
Thank you. My fiance is laughing in the background. So want to get into what I view as kind of evolving consumer demand. I think for a long time, the overriding aspect of consumer demand is really, really simple. Obviously, it's driven by a lot of nuance, but ultimately, what everyone's looking for is fair value. Value, however, is a lot of different things. Fair value can be a lower price compared to something else. Value can be social standing. I'm differentiated from my peers because I'm wearing X, or I understand that this is sustainable, so I am differentiated from you in my knowledge. That, for me, are kind of the tentpole elements of how consumers look at value in their products. I don't think that those things are going to change, however, over time. I think it might be influenced by other things. I think as the economy shifts, and if we're looking at what I think will be a long-term economic shift, people's preferences, their belief systems are going to be manipulated by external factors. And so the things that become valuable to them in their consumer choices are likely going to shift as well. Like I said at the beginning, product is a product, and the distribution strategy is a distribution strategy. But being nimble and allowing your business to kind of manage whatever changes need to be manufactured is going to be critical. There's only so many ways you can do that, right? And something that Naadam started looking at pretty quickly was, okay, what are the parts of our business that act as anchors currently? What are the things that, in terms of asset management terms, are not liquid? Right? Like, what are things that I can't change overnight, even if I want to? And how do we kind of reduce our exposure to that asset management risk? Those can take the form of kind of any major cost center of a business. Could be, which is unfortunate, but in a lot of cases, it's payroll, it's HR, it's people. In other cases, it's major marketing commitments, things that you can't undo even if you want to. They are massive COGS, right? So like investments in product, cost of goods that you can't undo. And so how do you like reduce your exposure to those things? Can you pull back now? Can you reserve the ability to make those decisions until you have a bit more information? I was on a call earlier today with somebody, and they're kind of asking, what do you think? What's like the thing that stands out to you the most right now about everything that's happening? My feeling, the overwhelming feeling that I'm saddled with is that history will judge both people and brands through a very particular and singular lens that we can't identify today. Having said that, we will be judged against the decisions we're making. Um, it's easy to try and jump into something and say, okay, we need to do a bunch of nonprofit work. Let's start giving all this stuff. My feeling today is I need to calculate. I need to run some calculus. And in order to run that calculus, I need more information. There's so much information coming through on a daily basis, either at the macro level or micro level of my business, um, that I feel almost a little frozen. And in my mind, I'm adding things up to make the appropriate decision. To be very careful about not making the missteps and understanding the history will judge whether it's the altruism, the product differentiators, our strategy around people. Ultimately, history will judge these things. So, with all of that in mind, being nimble and being able to assess value long term is going to be very, very critical. Want to just quickly touch on Naadam. I really don't want this to be too much about Naadam. I obviously love the business. I love all the businesses I'm involved in. But um, I think Nottingham is uniquely positioned at the moment, and I don't think it has anything to do with being smart or strategic. I think it's being a little lucky, right? Being well timed. In my experience, pretty much everything that I've ever worked on, you work really hard, you run the strategy and the analysis. At the end of the day, it's like where you're at the right place at the right time. And so, for some of the parts of our business that previously had been viewed as negatives, they're the right time for those things to turn into positives, whether it is the seasonal nature of our business. Just so happens most of our business is in fourth quarter. So we're not currently being affected by major changes to top line view of our business. Um, it's product, right? Like we normally for not our busiest season is over by now because people are starting to look at dresses and skirts and flip flops or whatever, bathing suits, whatever the trends are as the weather changes. Um, but with people staying inside, people buying more sweatpants and hoodies and pajamas, and that happens to be the thing that we recognized we could make during this time of year, but we recognized that 12 months ago. So it happens that we have the right product for the right time. And so in that way, Nottingham's actually running a healthy business at the moment. I say at the moment because 1,000 more variables are going to start to unfold over the next 6 to 12 months. So for that reason, we're just being very thoughtful about what our cash flow looks like. And if there was something we were going to take a risk on, if there was going to be a spending behavior that was classified as more risky, we're going to kind of pull back and mitigate our exposure to that risk, preserve the cash. We'll have it. We might use it for later. We might put it back in the same bucket that it was currently allocated towards. Having said that, we are monitoring all of that very closely. And then lastly, looking at short-term, long-term, I have no idea. Like I don't, I definitely don't pretend like I have some crystal ball. I have some information and I'm reacting to the information, not reacting appropriately all the time. Sometimes it's the wrong reaction at the wrong time. Having said that, I think a couple things I think, and these are not based on, like I said, any sort of economic expertise, but here's my guess on how the next 12 months look. I think the next 2 quarters, or second quarter, third quarter are going to be difficult, really difficult. I think it's going to be a time of conservation. I think it's going to be a time of protecting yourself for the long term. And so for that reason, spending across all marketing channels will be down. I think people are going to reassess launching product through different distribution channels. Some distribution channels are going to be gone entirely for the short term, but it will ultimately generate pent up demand. And that'll be demand on both sides. I think it'll be consumer demand. People like to shop, people want to buy stuff. I think regardless of um, your working circumstance, whether you have a job or you don't have a job, your economic circumstances, whatever it is, consumerism is like a real thing. That's part of human behavior. And so I think there'll be pent up demand, and that demand will kind of blossom in fourth quarter, but that won't be representative of where the economy is. That will be a short term release on kind of the demand figures, and it'll look like, oh, things are back to normal or even slightly better than what we thought normal was going to be, because people are going to be spending through fourth quarter. A problem is I think it's going to be a long road back to what normal really looks like. And so for that reason, I do believe that 2021 is going to be a lot harder than actually 2020 is. It's not because we'll be quarantined or anything, but I think that the economy is going to take a long time to get back to a healthy state of being. So for Naadam specifically, and any of the businesses that we're working on, I think we're going to keep kind of our top line projections where they are because we have seasonal business, and we think we'll kind of recover a bunch of losses or projected losses in a consolidated period of time. But then 2021, we'll have to kind of reassess our outlook a bit as we'll have more information and we'll understand a bit more. So I guess the gist of it is I don't know more than kind of anybody else probably listening in, just reacting to some of the things that I'm seeing on a um, daily and weekly basis. So I think I thought a lot about this. What does like fundraising look like? And I think that there's a backstory to it, and then a forward-looking approach. From a um, like post-mortem uh, view, I'd say fundraising in this category was headed in a negative direction, anyways. I think the investors that were putting cash into early stage businesses were recognizing that they were not as scalable as they had thought. They were not being rewarded in terms of M&A behavior. And it doesn't mean that people weren't buying and selling companies. They just weren't being bought and sold at multiples of revenue or EBITDA that had been earlier projected. And those early projections had forced companies to take high values to raise money, not overly dilute founders, kind of keep cap tables healthy. But ultimately, I think I think that was ending. I wasn't seeing a lot of those early stage investment behaviors happening anymore. This pandemic, this global economic crisis we're going through, is speeding all of that up. If we thought that it was coming to a halt 3 months ago, I think it is more or less over. And so, question is, how do you prepare yourself um, for raising capital if you need it? Where do you get it? Who do you get it from? That kind of stuff. And so, my approach to all of this has been prioritize fundamentals of a business: good cash flow, profitability, diversify yourself enough that your risk is spread, that you can um, salvage parts of the business if other parts fall through. Um, there'll be less capital available. And so that means you're not going to be able to funnel capital that you raise into um, direct response marketing strategies to drum up top line revenue. You actually need to build fundamentals of business. Back to that earlier example I gave, which is you can't spend more than you have after you buy and sell a thing. If your strategy is to spend $160 acquiring customers, but you only make $50 between the cost of the goods and your retail price, no one that'll never win, and it'll be very difficult even at scale to shift that back to a place that has a very healthy margin for long-term success in this category. So even with healthy fundamentals, being strategic about your channel diversification is going to be critical, and then being able to take less capital to do the same, that's going to be the challenge. And so I think this will definitely separate great founders from mediocre founders. Unfortunately, I think that this will separate the people who have built fundamentals at first and are focused on that and can do it with less money, do it over maybe a longer period of time, and build a healthier business. This is how it was before we went through a bull market for 10 years, right? Like before this crazy economic boom that we just went through, these same things were prioritized around early stage financing. So I think we're just kind of regressing back to a state of maybe rationality. At least that's how I'm looking at it. That's how I'm looking at future investments as well. Now jump ahead a little bit. What does marketing maybe look like? I could tell you what I'm doing with Naadam. I could tell you what I'm doing with any of the other businesses I'm involved with. We're prioritizing channels where we can consistently project and manage return on ad spend. Channels that traditionally have a sporadic return are difficult to prioritize during this time. We're really looking at the things at a kind of base case level and saying, okay, if I do X and I get X out of it, then we're going to stick with that formula because that's easier to project. And I need to project really thoughtfully right now because I need to know exactly how much money I'm going to have month over month. I can't be putting money into things that it's unclear what the return will be. Either it's 1x or it's 10x. That's not sound decision making. However, um, I think a lot of brands are doing that, and I think generally marketing budgets are getting slashed, and so for that reason, um, it's classic supply and demand economics. The demand for supply of advertising inventory is going to be um, way down, and so that means the cost for that ad inventory should also come down. It means if you want to consolidate and you want to figure out strategies to bulk buy advertising, I think that those opportunities will exist, whether it's on TV, out of home, general awareness spend, or even your kind of very traditional targeted direct response digital marketing like Facebook and Instagram. Um, I don't know. I haven't really seen that yet. I saw a quick kind of shudder in early March where we saw our ad spend come way down, our ROAS go way up. So, we went from 5x to 10x on our ad spend. It's coming back to a more normal state. Having said that, I think it'll probably head back in the direction that's more positive for people who are spending money on marketing, on digital marketing, probably towards the end of second quarter into third quarter. Um, Resource planning, this is something that I think everyone's going to be looking at across direct consumer pretty carefully. Um, Again, I know I'm beating a dead horse on all of this, but cash flow management, optimize and extend your terms as much as you possibly can to keep as much money on the books as you need. You can do that by extending terms with your manufacturers, getting terms on your logistics. You can do that by negotiating terms with your ad platforms like Facebook and Instagram. They'll extend 90-day terms on your ad spend or put it on credit cards. And then, something that we've done is we've looked at kind of our hiring strategy moving forward. We were lucky, or Naadam specifically was lucky, in that we weren't trying to have another year of triple digit growth. We were conservative looking at profitability anyways, but there were a lot of hires and there were growth in certain categories, kind of pared that back for now until we know more. And so we've reprioritized what the departmental hiring strategies need to look like in the near future. These are all, I think, realities of what direct consumer will look like across the board. Um, some categories are just going to do well by the nature of how consumers want to spend money, some of their behaviors. Um, Others are going to become smaller opportunities in the near future. Um, I guess I try and look at things over the long term. I don't always have that luxury, but I try to. Um, and over time, things will even out. They just will. Whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, things will even out. And so I kind of keep that in mind no matter what. So looking at growth, I think, I think I double did. Let me move forward here. So I want to actually talk about fourth quarter since I think we're running out of time. We're thinking mostly about fourth quarter right now. We're looking at how do we handle what we think will be our upswing? How do we prepare for that? Right? We had to buy millions and millions of dollars worth of inventory for a time of year that, like I said earlier, I think will be a period where we can recover a bit. But I have to make basically big bets with lots of my available cash flow. And yes, we've extended it through the right terms and things like that. But how are we supposed to look at what normal might look like in Q4? I have what I think and I have what I hope. And those are two distinctively different things. I'm hoping retail goes back. I'd love to see that behavior develop. We're trying to plan inventory for that reality. We're trying to plan some expansion, even opening more stores potentially if we can get there. But we'll see how things unfold in the near future. Like I said earlier, I think I don't think any part of this year is going to feel normal for anybody. I think um, we will make adjustments. It will clear a path towards winners and losers. I think some brands will emerge unexpectedly as big winners in the near future and long term. Others that were front runners will fall behind. I think it's going to be a really interesting time. I think that there'll be some kind of amalgamation of resources. I think there'll be some consolidation in the industry. And I've been having this conversation a lot with people really about how things consolidate amidst um, disaster, so to speak, or kind of change of direction. My expectation is that because so much capital has been invested to develop um, really great brands, good products, but didn't specifically get invested in kind of fundamentals of the organization like smart finance or supply chain. Um, that it's likely great brands consolidate under shared back-end resources. I think that could be driven by private equity, maybe even later stage venture capital, or just general conglomeratization. I expect we start to see that develop a bit in 2020. So, overall, I thought a lot about this, but I really do feel like your guess is as good as mine. Um, I'm just responding to like thousands of tiny touch points across multiple businesses to try and reach some conclusions. I'll end with the fact that everything I've just said could, one, is based only on my experience, but two, could totally be overhauled by information that gets developed in the next couple of weeks. And my hope is that some of my predictions are wrong and things are more positive. Um, but your guess is as good as mine. So um, I'll turn it over to you, Jill. Happy to answer any questions, whatever you think.
Matt, you did put a lot of thought into this, and we are so grateful. Thank you. This was an awesome presentation, I must say. I feel like I do have questions, although you kind of covered the bases. And definitely, you guys use the Q&A function. I'm going to let you guys take over for a bit also. But Matt, talk to me about just direct to consumer, the model in general. Where is that going?
Yeah, well, I think direct consumer for me always represented a couple things. I think it's anything where you're having a direct conversation and selling directly to customers. So that looked like retail, that looked like certain external channels, but most importantly, I think it was online. Obviously, online is emerging in this current state of isolation as a leader because it's the most convenient and simplest thing to do. But I think still having like making sure direct consumer has other channels to support it is going to be a real factor of how brands progress in the future. I firmly believe that brands that are direct consumer currently are probably feeling like, wow, thank God, like we have direct consumer, we've done such a good job building it. Having said that, they still will need diversification. So I think regardless over time, direct consumer will become omni-channel. Direct consumer as a single channel is difficult primarily because on its own, um, selling product online, marketing online is just very expensive unless your supply chain is so good out of the gates that your products have such high gross margins that your contribution margin is enough to repay everything that it costs to run a really streamlined digital marketing and e-commerce business. It's unlikely that you can exist singularly off of one channel. So in the near term, I think it's clearly a winning formula. I think long term, it still needs to diversify.
Yes. Somebody here is asking a question. I definitely had physical retail top of mind. I wanted to ask you about whether uh, I guess, what you have come to believe about the role of physical retail, whether that's wavered or whether you have new thoughts. Someone here is also asking about whether you'll consider pop-ups in the past and whether you saw, or whether you'll consider pop-ups in this climate moving forward and whether those in the past you saw a return on investment.
Well, so for retail as a whole, I think it'll come back because I think retail is a really important part of how consumers shop. It's not the only way they shop, but it's a meaningful part of how you develop brand loyalty. You interact with a human being. You touch a product. Those things cannot be replicated through any sort of online, singularly online strategy. So I think it will come back. The way I'm viewing it today is, for better or for worse, the real estate market is getting the rug pulled out from underneath it, which means hopefully costs for retail are extremely negotiable and you can lock in rates for short term or long term retail positions that are um, meaningful, that allow you to run a profitable business. Difficulty is that sometimes um, certain retail so expensive that unless you have a brand that has such a unique product or such a powerful community, very hard for to develop for profitability. But with um, costs coming down for the actual real estate, I think it'll become a more profitable channel. And so I think for that reason, people will start to invest in a lot more. That's how we're viewing it. We want to take advantage of this and get aggressive about how we think about it as a long-term strategy for us.
Yeah, as costs are down, you reference kind of customer acquisition costs. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe how you're taking advantage of that? Where do you see costs going from here?
Yeah, I think right now customer acquisition costs have evened out back to where they were, but I do think that they will come down. I don't. I just don't think everything happens all at once. I think things get staggered out. In reality, you really can't just cut out your digital marketing spend entirely. If you have a sophisticated digital marketing strategy, you know that you can't turn it off and turn it on without incurring um, high costs. It's just like any sort of momentum. To build momentum, it takes energy, a lot more energy than it does to sustain a consistent role. And so, um, if you turn off all of your digital marketing, the cost of turning it back on is really, really hard. But the pared down version of what digital marketing looks like hasn't really taken effect yet. And so I don't think that that supply demand ratio that I talked about a little bit earlier has actually happened. But when it does, and there's more demand, there's more supply than there is demand, costs will come down across the board. You'll see uh, brands you didn't expect um, in new marketing channels, most likely.
Right on. Someone's asking about kind of the support you've received in this climate. If you are VC backed, if VCs are helping, or if you've received or sought out government assistance, what's going on there?
Yeah, I think first of all, the government assistance stuff was very tricky. I recognize that banks that were distributing those funds were incentivized to prioritize um, allocations at a certain amount over others. And if you were really small and only needed 80 to $100,000, you were you were not prioritized. The banks were making more money off of releasing a higher sum, and so a lot of people that deserved the funding from the government and through the banks, didn't get it. And so, for that reason, we looked at it, but we knew that we didn't specifically need it all. And so we were very thoughtful about how we proceeded in that regard. Um, when it comes to VC and private equity funding, I think everybody's looking at the same set of circumstances, right? So you have to look at what are the motivations of the people that are investing in you, and who do they respond to, who do they answer to, and who do those people answer to? And if you can kind of run it up the flagpole, you can understand why certain decisions need to be made. Um, VCs were they report to LPs. LPs are the limited partners in funds that distribute that capital. Those LPs can take the form of institutions, they can take the form of family offices, individuals, etc. All of those upper funnel contributors or limited partners have their own constraints. They might be calling their capital. They might be looking for ways to create more liquidity. They might be asking their funds to halt spending. Other funds who have different agreements or different types of LPs might be recognizing that now is the time they need to support their investments, not step away from them. We've seen kind of a varying degree of responses. Having said that, on a personal level, every single fund that I've spoken to, whether they're an investor of mine or um, partners of mine, or just people I know, are being responsive and thoughtful and trying to, at the very least, give guidance to their investments. Um, I think some of them are looking at the bigger picture and saying, okay, well, like I've invested a lot of money in this business, but if this persists over 12 months, does this business even have a chance? Why would I invest more to give it 6 months of runway when after that 6 months, I'm going to lose the additional investment I put in? And as painful as that reconciliation is, that's the reality of having to make tough decisions in a difficult financial market.
Yeah. You and I know you invest in brands and companies as well. We talked about the fact that investment dollars are going to be going to new categories. There's going to be more focus on maybe categories that haven't seen as much traction to date. Uh, can you expand on that? Am I on the right track?
Yeah, well, I think some businesses will do better in a altered economic and COVID climate, right? Like there's some categories that people aren't shopping right now, and they might not shop for a long time. Um, whether it's luggage or high-heeled shoes or like the things that are impractical against reality are obviously going to be deprioritized um, for consumers. And I think that that's probably some of that's in the short term and some of that's in the long term. Like I said earlier, I think most brands, whether or not you sell luggage or high heeled shoes or sunglasses, um, you'll get a bump in fourth quarter from like pent up consumer demand. But if you are not right sized from a price perspective relative to where people's discretionary spending is, if you don't have a product that people need, um, or have any use for, then it's going to be really hard to invest in those companies or prioritize them. I mean, uh, we're just seeing like a shift in behavior really quickly, right? If you look like 10 years ago, the things that people wanted to buy and invest in, they probably look really different. Like we're going through a shift that is that drastic, kind of right in front of us. Um, and kind of being able to boil down consumer behavior, boil down what's happening, um, I think should allow common sense to prevail where we can say, you know what, deodorant companies might do better. People are staying at home. They still need to smell good, right? People still need shampoo, right? Like essential things are still needed. We still need food. People need lounge. People are buying sweatpants because people aren't wearing khakis or jeans anymore. Like those things are reality. So I expect that's the type of thinking that motivates consumer spending and investment choices moving forward.
Yeah, I know you build brands around folks with a built-in following, influential folks. Somebody here is asking about kind of where you think influencer marketing in general will go. Will
Yeah.
that change course?
So I think what this will do, what we're seeing kind of across all marketing channels, it's going to weed out the good ones versus the bad ones. I think that there are some, let's qualify them as influencer channels that were built off of shaky ground to begin with, that didn't have that what they were talking to their followers or community about was maybe inauthentic uh, relative to that community. The ones that were built naturally and organically, that were built with this kind of idea of like holding a mirror up to your follower, I think that those are the ones that are still going to be very, very valuable channels no matter what.
Mm.
So we're just going to see kind of differentiation between the good ones and the bad ones. It'll call out the ones that, in fact, are not positioned with great engagement rates and don't support their partners. Because at the end of the day, I view both sides of it, right? Like, yes, I work on the influencer side from a business perspective, but I also work with it from as a media channel. As a media channel, we'll know quickly, right? Like if I spend $10,000 with an influencer and I make $50,000 in sales off of the links they swiped out to or the way they represented my product, um, that will still be a valuable channel. And so I don't want people to think like, wow, like it's all over. I've seen so much of this like hyperbolic response. Like it's the end of this, it's the end of that. That's not the reality. Things are so much more nuanced and driven by um, like actualities than like a headline would predict. So really, really simply stated, The best ones will continue to do really well, and in fact, they'll do even better because they'll consolidate media spends, whereas the ones that weren't positioned well anyways, or were built off of shaky ground with low engagement rates and not a great understanding of their community, are probably going to have a difficult time attracting media dollars. Um, it's the same thing that will go for any other brand, right? If you're built off of a strong foundation with the right product for the right consumer, you will similarly succeed. If it was built off of shaky ground, if your brand was built off of shaky ground, and you were basically jamming a product down your customer's throat by targeting them so aggressively with advertising, yeah, it's unlikely that you'll have a meaningful foundation to build off of long term.
Makes sense to me. Last question for you, and we will wrap it up. This has been awesome. You talked about consumer behavior, where that's going, and the fact that kind of with your product, you kind of lucked out considering the current what people are buying now. But also, did you luck out in terms of who your customer is? We talked in the past about the millennial consumer, their habits. What you've come to know about your customer and millennials, like do you feel like you've lucked out in that capacity?
I don't know yet, honestly. I think it goes back to the one of the first things I was referencing, which was all about what fair value is and what value is to your customer. Um, I don't know exactly um, where our value will sit with our kind of core customers long term. I'd like to think that affordably priced, high value quality items will be viewed slightly higher on the scale of necessity than something that feels frivolous or less valuable to you. um, the only thing I'll say is that Naadam specifically has a very diversified um, group of consumers. We have, um, I think people don't always recognize this, but Naadam's digital business was really built off of customers across the country, not just on the coasts. And it wasn't just built by millennials, it was built by a broad range of generations. And so for that reason, I haven't really seen there hasn't been a quick and easy shift or saying, oh, because we're all millennials are getting laid off or something and they don't have money. I haven't seen any of that, nor do I know that that's really the reality. Um, so I don't know, but it goes back to value. If we have value for the right consumer, we'll continue to hold strong, most likely.
Awesome. Well, that will do it. Matt, you were great.
Thank
Your
you.
fingers. Thank you for being here today. Thank you so, so much. And thank you, everyone who joined and who asked such great questions. This has been an awesome conversation. Truly appreciate it. And we will be back next week with another Glossy Plus Talks that will be with Bryce and Gigi Goldman, the co founders of Kapari, hosted by Priya Rao. So thank you all. Thank you, Matt. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.